Good evening, and welcome to the Early Childhood Education Roundtable. To listen to the roundtable in Spanish or English, in Spanish, please call 339-207-8039. My name is Dr. Deanne Collins, and I'm the Deputy State Superintendent for the Office of Teaching and Learning. It is my pleasure to facilitate this virtual roundtable and to welcome our State Superintendent, Mr. Chaudhary. We also want to thank and welcome all of our roundtable participants and all of the viewers that are watching us live on YouTube. We appreciate you joining us this evening. The State Board of Education and the Maryland State Department of Education are hosting this roundtable in a series of roundtables and other engagement events to hear about your experiences and ideas for the future of education in Maryland. We are using this feedback to guide the development of a multi-year strategic plan that will implement the blueprint for Maryland's future and also strengthen our public education system. We would like to hear from our viewers, so we ask that you share your thoughts on public education in Maryland by completing the strategic planning survey at marylandpublicschools.org/survey. We will make sure that the link is in the WebEx and the YouTube chat so that you can just click on it as well. This evening, we will hear from families about their experiences accessing and engaging with early learning opportunities and family support programs. We will be asking about the blueprint for Maryland's future investments in high quality early childhood education and learning experiences that will mean more meaningful, equitable opportunities for children across the state to succeed as they continue in their education throughout college and career. The blueprint expands full day, high quality pre-kindergarten access so that all children are ready to learn and excel in kindergarten. The legislation also increases the number of pre-kindergarten educators and child care providers, in addition to family support programs. So before we get started, I'd like to go over a few expectations and some housekeeping items. We are live streaming this roundtable on YouTube from 6 o'clock to 7:30 p.m. If you are viewing on the live stream, you can use the chat to ask questions and also make comments throughout the evening. We will also be sharing those information that you put in the chat towards the end of the roundtable and using this feedback to inform our planning too. As a reminder, once again, this meeting will be live streamed and recorded, so your participation implies consent to be recorded. When you're not speaking, please stay muted and use the chat function if we are running short on time and there are additional comments you would like to add. Now, let's hear from our State Superintendent, Mr. Chaudhary, for his opening remarks. Mr. Chaudhary, welcome.
Thank you, Deanne. Thank you to all the participants. We are just honored and excited to have you here this evening out of your busy schedules. You know, the child care work is the backbone for everything, and we need to get it right. As a parent of a 2-month-old, first-time parent whose phone is like dominated with pictures of his kid every day. There's a new one every day, every night. It's something my wife and I are beginning to wonder, right? She is currently taking a break from work. I don't sleep at all, and eventually she will be working. And what will that look like? And we are far away from family and friends, hopefully making new friends as we settle into Maryland. But it's a real feeling, right? Making sure you can have the best fit as well as safe and secure place for your children, and then ultimately as they begin their K-12 journey. So I am really excited for you to be here. I'm excited to be in Maryland. I tell everyone before we begin, please speak your truth. We are really here to listen. I may chime in and ask you like a follow-up question, just because I'm really interested in getting a little more detail around your thinking and what you're sharing. So the team knows that I'm the reason why things last a little longer sometimes. So I'll try not to ask too many questions, but I really appreciate your guys' time. And again, please speak your truth. And with that, Deanne, take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Chaudhry. I noticed that one of our board members joined us as well, so I'd like to say hello and welcome. Ms. Chen Ching Chang, welcome and thank you so much for joining us this evening. We appreciate your participation. There she is. Thank you for joining us. So now we'd like to meet our roundtable participants. We want you to introduce yourself by stating your full name, your role, your school, district, grade levels or organization, and a brief description of your work. So I'll call on you and then you can introduce yourself to our audience. First, let's start with John and Katie Hampton. Welcome.
Hi, I'm John Hampton. My wife's upstairs watching my daughter right now, but I'm in Washington County, Maryland. I'm a teacher, and so is my wife. Our daughter goes to a local daycare here in town, and we're really happy with it, and we appreciate you guys inviting us on here.
Thank you so much. Next, we'll hear from Evelyn.
Hi, good evening. My name is Evelyn. I am in Prince George's County. I have a 6-year-old and a 2-year-old, and I work in early childhood. So I had to double dip as a parent of an early childhood and someone who works in early childhood. Nice to meet everybody.
Thank you. Welcome. Thanks for joining us. Next, let's hear from Amy and Tom Hildebrand.
Hi, I'm Amy Hildebrand. My husband is watching the children. I'm in Washington County. I am an elementary school teacher here in the county, and we have a 3-year-old who attends a local child care center. I have 2 older daughters that have also gone through the same child care center. So we've been there for a while, and we absolutely love it. And I am very excited to be able to participate in this. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, let's hear from Anne Marie.
Hi, I'm Anna Marie Tucker. I'm in St. Mary's County. I have a 5-year-old who is on the spectrum, and I have a 9-month-old who thinks he's the boss of the house. We're currently in a public school local to us. So far, so good. We're a military family, moved here from California back in 2020.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. Next, let's hear from Laura.
Hi, I'm Laura Zilberman. It's nice to meet you all. Thank you so much for having us here tonight and taking the time to hear from us. I'm in St. Mary's County also. I am a parent of a 7-year-old with significant special needs, a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old, and I work in healthcare. We have been utilizing the public school system and also early childhood education privately. So have a little bit of experience with both sides.
Great. Thank you so much for joining us. Next, let's hear from Bridget.
Hello, my name is Bridget Jeffrey. I'm in Baltimore City. I actually am an educator, early childhood educator in Baltimore City. I am a mother to a very active 2-year-old who actually participates and receives services from infants and toddlers, and she also participates in Judy Center program. So I'm very pleased with what I've seen and what she's experienced so far. I've seen a lot of growth, and so I'm excited to share my experience.
Great. Thank you so much. Next, we'll hear from Elsa. And I think Elsa is joining us by phone, and we have an interpreter to help us out. So we appreciate that. Are we able to introduce Elsa Ramirez? Okay, well, we hope she can join us. Kristen Palmer. think Kristen had to step off. And also we were supposed to have Katie Schmidt join us, but I believe she had to log off, unfortunately, having some technical difficulties. Let's see, is Monique here?
Yes, my name is Monique Daniels, and I am with Baltimore County. I work in higher education, and I have a almost 3-year-old in a couple weeks. And we've been working along with infants and toddlers in our county, and he also goes to a day center, an ABA center. So he also has special needs as well.
Thank you so much. And let's see, Brittany. Brittany, you just need to come off mute. Can you hear us? There you go. Oh, Brittany, unfortunately, we can't hear you. If you look in the chat, we do have some directions for how we can support you with the technology so that you can participate. So please, please, please take advantage of that, because we want to make sure that we get to hear your voices. But Brittany is joining us from Baltimore City, and she's a Head Start and Judy Center teacher. So thank you. And all of us we have something in common too. I'm actually, my son is downstairs. My husband's watching him. I have my door closed as well. So we all are going through similar experiences. So this is great. Thank you so much for everyone. All right, so now we're going to transition into our questions, and we're looking forward to a rich and a robust conversation with you as we talk about your experiences with early childhood education. And as Mr. Chaudhary mentioned, he may chime in and ask some follow-up questions, and you may have some follow-ups as well. Just so the audience knows, each participant chose questions that are most important to them to discuss this evening. So we will be calling on you for those specific questions to make sure everyone is able to share about what is most important to them. If you have ideas and you want to add them and you were not called upon, please use the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen. To our YouTube live viewers, please share your thoughts on the questions in the chat. And I know that we were having some technical difficulties and some of you were assigned questions, so we can just circle back to you. I'll try to keep track to make sure that we can get to everyone. So our first question is related to pre-K access. The blueprint for Maryland's future expands access to affordable or no-cost full-day pre-kindergarten for 3- and 4-year-old students. Describe your experience accessing pre-kindergarten programs. What worked well and what needs to be better to expand access to pre-K programs for more families? So let's start with Laura. And also we dropped the question in the chat just so people can see it. So Laura, why don't you share your thoughts with us?
Sure, thank you. You know, I'm going to start by talking about how I went through the process with my daughter who went through infants and toddlers. We did have an IFSP and then was transferred to an IEP. So our access to pre-K was very, very easy. It was such a great transition, you know, having that IEP in place. And luckily, we live in a county where, with public education, it seems like it's pretty easy for folks to get a spot in the public pre-K programs. So that was great. And you know, having a child with special needs going into pre-K, where the transportation was provided, was, you know, incredible. And having, you know, food during the day, they had lunch, they had snacks for the kids. So there was access to so many things. As well as inclusion, which is definitely important to me as a special needs mom. Having my daughter go into a class where she would be with typical peers, as well as other children who were experiencing some developmental delays, was definitely important to me. A couple things that maybe could have gone better. With the children with special needs, it is sometimes a lengthy process to try to get services and evaluations needed. You know, there's a lot of going back to the drawing board, and it seems like it could maybe be streamlined a little bit. You know, and here locally, we do have a shortage of some early intervention personnel. So there are children who are written to have certain services, but aren't getting them right now, and they're owed these services. But, you know, sometimes acting early is the best that you can do, and knowing that there's kids that need physical therapy and they're not getting it when they should, that's a big access, you know, hiccup for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that real life lived experience. I wonder if Elsa, if we can hear from Elsa right now. She didn't have a chance to introduce herself, but we wanted to know, Elsa, about your experience. Are you able to share with us?
Uno está en Gestar y el otro está en Gestar. Para mí el programa es estupendo, tiene muchos beneficios, le ha ayudado bastante a mis hijos. Las maestras, todos son muy preparados y de verdad yo estoy muy contenta en el programa y pues uno que quisiera, verdad, que muchos más niños tuvieran esa oportunidad de pues, estar en el programa.
Well, my name is Elsa Ramirez. I have three children. Two are in the program and one is in the public school. And the program is wonderful. Children benefit from them. They help my children. And the teachers, the team are very prepared. And I'm really happy with the program. And I want that other kids to have the opportunity to be in the program.
Thank you. Elsa, do you have any ideas on how we can better support? Are there some needs that we can provide to families that you can think about and share to help expand access?
A sus hijos, tal vez tienen la oportunidad de estar ahí como nosotros. Es muy importante principalmente motivarlos para que ellos entiendan que no es el principio de la vida de nuestros hijos. Yo creo que es fundamental para el futuro.
Well, I think that we have to share with other people and tell them we know and invite them to the program and to enroll the children to be here with us and to motivate them to know that it's important for the future of the children.
Great. Thank you very much for that feedback. Anyone else want to share their experience or ideas before we move on to the next question? I'm going to give you some time.
I can speak a little bit for Washington County, just some notes that I had jotted down. I feel that Washington County Public Schools has done a nice job with having an abundance of public pre-K. But I think what we're finding is that is taking away the opportunity for child care centers to keep some of those age students, because not all parents are comfortable sending their students to a public school for pre-K. I teach third grade and I live in an elementary school with public pre-Ks, and I have not been comfortable sending my students, or not my students, my children to the public pre-K for multiple reasons. And I think that there's different things that could happen to allow the centers to be able, at least here in Washington County, to kind of still hold on to those students. I think that we're finding that an expansion grant and some different money that has been available to centers cannot be tapped into unless they're at a certain ratio. And that ratio is not being fulfilled because because a lot of the kids that age are going to the public schools for pre-K.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you for sharing that real life perspective. And you're right, that's something that we are going to have to address. Anne Marie, I saw your hand next, and then Evelyn.
So for me, coming from a completely different state across the country, essentially, I think I'd have to agree with Elsa. I believe more public outreach and knowledge. So if we get the information out about these wonderful programs, there's going to be, more activity, more students coming in. Not every county seems to advertise what they've got benefit-wise. I know a lot of information that I have found out has been basically through social media or calling the school directly and, trying to ask questions. But there are some shy parents out there that may not feel comfortable, speaking to that. So maybe even just more social media posts about, hey, we have this Head Start program and this is how you can sign up or get started. More information just available to the public, I think, would be helpful in a more mainstream way.
Thank you. Over communicating, over saturating information, right?
Yeah.
Yes. Very good. Evelyn, I'll give you the last word on this one.
Not a word, but maybe a follow-up question is, as someone who works and is fully immersed, and not for me, for I forget your name, Amy. Why would you not? What is it that you're seeing that makes you lack the confidence to put your children in these programs?
Sure. So I'm not sure what it looks like in your county, but in our county, every elementary school has at least one pre-K classroom. So those pre-K students are in a school building that range from them as 4-year-olds all the way up to 10 and 11-year-olds. They ride the buses with that entire age group, obviously, unless they're private, transportation from their parents. They share the same lunchroom with a multitude of age students. They go to recess with a multitude of age students. So that is a concern for me as a parent. And I kind of float both sides because I know the benefit from the public pre-Ks and I see what those students in my building achieve. But from a parent perspective, I'm still apprehensive for my littlest one to be there for that aspect. And then I have just really seen, in my opinion, the amount of training and education, specifically in early childhood education, that our child care center teachers have immersed themselves in. Again, I, am a teacher and I work with my, the pre-K teachers that are in my building. And we do have professional development throughout, the school year and over the summer, but it's voluntary. So, sometimes we as teachers don't do any additional professional development past our bachelor's or past our master's, whereas the teachers at my child's center, they're in Ocean City right now doing all of the training that's there. And they have to stay on top of kind of all of that. So I think those are kind of my two, like, number one and number two reasons for why we've decided to keep our kids in a center until kindergarten.
Great. Evelyn, thank you for taking a risk and asking that question. And Amy, thank you for being very transparent. We appreciate it. It's a nice segue to our next question. I just want to make sure I'm monitoring the chat. Brittany actually made a comment around communication. I think if the school can promote by flyers about the school and different activities that are provided by staff, then the parent and other people in the community will come out based on the information that was provided. Great. And then John mentioned the smaller class sizes in Washington County, and that gives extra attention. And then Laura from St. Mary's mentioned there's a lot of adult support. So thank you. This is a good segue to our next question around public and private partnerships, which again is essential to expanding and widening the net for the childcare community. So the blueprint also supports growing partnerships with schools, childcare providers in family homes, childcare centers, and/or Head Start programs to provide more early learning options for families. What type of program is your early learner enrolled in, and why did you choose that program? Also, what improvements would you make? So Evelyn, we're actually going to start with you.
My child is in a center, and we're a multilingual family. So I chose a center that is a bilingual center because I truly have I think having language skills, additional language skills, is a great skill just in life in general. So I was looking for somewhere where she could learn an additional language in addition to what we speak at home. So that's why we ended up where we are, and we're all learning the language. As far as improvements, truthfully, I think putting her in this program was the best decision we could make as a family for her as far as education goes, because the teachers are so involved and they're very immersed. Like Amy was saying, like early, like they spend so much energy trying to better themselves and teaches children in a very different way than what I've seen and from where I work. Unfortunately, it's not competitive money wise. So it's hard to retain qualified teachers in a center just because there's no way. I mean, the centers cannot match what these teachers need to be paid. So if there's anything that I could improve on, would be incentives to make sure that early childhood center, especially with teachers who have immersed themselves so much, they should get the compensation for the level of education or certification. I mean, we have a hard enough time having certified teachers in the public school system as is, but they are being asked to maintain a certain level of certification and more. And I mean, some of it is voluntary, the and more part. So I think they should be compensated.
Thank you. John, can you share your perspective, the type of program that your child is in, and anything that we could do differently?
Sure. My daughter attends daycare here, child care center, sorry, in Washington County. She's 2.5. We've been there since she was an infant. They've taken great care of her. We always felt safe sending her there, which was like our top priority. And then the education she's getting from there is like an added bonus to it. It's been really great. Evelyn, I think you had the best answer in the world about just funding these programs, making sure they can retain staff, because we work in school systems where we're seeing a teacher shortage, and it's just a trickle down effect into the child care centers. And I think compensating those teachers is a way to keep them there, because at our child care center, my daughter's had a revolving door of amazing teachers, but it's somebody new every few months because they leave because they need to make a living with the way the world is right now. So I think just being able to compensate those teachers and the higher ups in the child care centers is very, very important in helping them out with training, things of that nature.
Thank you. Thank you. Brittany, where's your child at, and what's been your experience? And Brittany, it still seems like you're having trouble with your audio. So if you want, you can drop your comments and what you want to say in the chat, and I can circle back and read them. If that works for you. Okay. Laura, why don't you share where your child is and your experience?
So I just want to say that I think the last two people that spoke just totally nailed it with the need for increased compensation, both at centers, private schools and public schools for early childhood educators, because they set the tone for the entire school experience for our kids. And we have just had incredible teachers, wherever we've gone. We've been really lucky. So my son right now is at a play-based preschool, and it's just incredible to see, the focus on play. There's emerging and current research talking about, the downside of having so many academics in early childhood education, and how children need to play and learn how to self-direct and self-regulate and be creative. And be outside and cross midline and be active, instead of sitting at a desk doing so many worksheets at such a young age. And I'm just very passionate about that. I think that finding a school or a specific teacher that utilizes that same kind of philosophy on the importance of play with these young kids is definitely clutch.
Can you share a little bit about just some of the types of like play-based activities that you really like about the experience that your child is going through? Like just maybe a couple that you've seen or experienced, or that you've seen in action, that, so for our viewers, so they understand what play-based learning could look like.
Sure. So for instance, my child spends so much time outside at his preschool and doing a lot of things instead of writing and learning letters from worksheets or textbooks, or, sitting at a desk there, writing in the sandbox, doing letters in the sandbox, doing so many pre-writing activities that are also sensory, finger painting, having a garden, learning about the importance of the environment and responsibility, and also I think another aspect of that school that I didn't mention was, group learning, where you're kind of in a group with an activity that the children are supposed to work together on, but they each are able to take a role and really assist in each other's learning. I think that's so great. And it helps long-term with developing those early learning or early love of learning skills and creativity.
Thank you.
And Laura, those specific examples are really helpful, because sometimes when we hear play, it doesn't present the full picture, but like you said, it's very multi-sensory, very hands-on. And sometimes the students don't even realize that they are learning, but think about how language rich it is in those type of environments as well. And so those specific examples are really helpful to other parents and educators. So we appreciate the details.
Thank you. It's the being social and the communicating, and so many aspects go into it. So it's really great.
And I wanted to capture, Brittany was able to drop her response in the chat, so I wanted to read it. And she mentioned that the program she picked was the Judy Center, because her child can react to working with other children in her same age group. And she likes that the Judy Center has a lot of activities for her child to participate in. That's great. And the Judy Center is organized in the way for parent and child activities. There's a lot of read alouds that happen where you have the parent and the child sitting together. A lot of supports in the community where you may have different events come actually into the center, again, that are very multi-sensory and hands-on. And the Judy Centers also support birth to 3, right? So you have babies that are in this environment with other children. So it is a very good space, again, that taps into a lot of the strengths of young children. So that's great. I also noticed that Amy had dropped a few chats as we were talking about teacher retention, saying that it's a huge problem and we need better salaries, and that childcare teachers are coming into the centers being trained, but then leaving for public education and better pay for benefits. So as we think about, retention and retaining, we really need to think about pre-K and beyond, right? Just not K to 12, but that pre-K space as well, as we look at ways to, retain. And then John dropped something in the chat that public education is being bogged down with testing and data collection, that learning through play is not existent. So it's nice that child care centers are still able to offer learning through play activities. I also think that that's where the mixed delivery system may help, where you get more public and private providers together, learning from each other about sort of the way that you can do play-based activities in a public setting. So thank you. Okay, I think I need to, I don't know that I think I got everybody. Did I miss? Yeah, I did. We have to move on to the next question. They're going to get me. Okay, let's talk about workforce. Developing a professional workforce of childcare providers and early childhood educators to care for and educate young learners is a priority in the blueprint. That was a mouthful. So let me read it again. Developing a professional workforce of early childhood providers and early childhood educators to care for and educate young learners is a priority in the blueprint. Describe the qualities and characteristics of impactful early childhood educators and child care providers who have effectively prepared children for success in kindergarten. Let's start with Amy. Amy, what do you have to share?
So I just kind of made a list, which I think all of us, when you think of a teacher, you have someone that's caring, loving, patience is a huge part. And then especially when it comes to early childhood, I kind of go back to my comments earlier of just being extensively trained in early childhood, and not just your degree and stopping at your degree, but continuing that training and education. I think a huge part also is having, I say a superior, could be your boss or manager, that it respects you and you know that you're appreciated by them. Working in the public schools, you get admins, every so many years, and sometimes they don't create the best work environments. And that can be a huge deterrent for teachers to stay, whether they love their job or not. And then I think we go back to the compensation. I mean, I think every question almost hits the compensation, that, the teachers have to be compensated appropriately, that their wage and their salary meets their education and meets their qualifications. I mean, we at our center, we currently have a teacher that came from out of state. She has probably over 200 hours of, the 200 hour, more than 200 hours that she needs, but she's only listed as a teacher's aide because the way that the licensing is working, coming from out of state, she's not qualified as a teacher in our county or in our state, which is unfortunate because that could be another teacher position that she could take at our daycare center. And then just to end, just obviously creating a welcoming learning environment to foster the love of learning for these little babies that, this is their first time in a school setting, and you don't want to make a negative impact.
Yes, very important. And we agree. Mr. Choder and I have talked about this many times, about the licensure requirement and how that could sometimes be a barrier. So we appreciate you hearing your perspective. Monique, we get to hear from you. Share your experience.
Sure. I believe, the qualities and characteristics that really impact educators include being sensitive to how the children are being treated, providing individualized attention and care for the kids, having patience for each child's learning style. I think there's just different methods of learning, and there's just not a one size fits all kind of approach that's kind of piggybacking up on, like, if it's a play or if it's something that's visual, or if it's interactive. I think it's also about hiring the right teachers and providing, like, the right culture for the children that are being educated in these systems. So essentially, our kids are our focus, and it's kind of difficult if there's environments where it's classrooms or centers that are too overcrowded, or there's more of a kid or learning ratio more than like a parent, you know, the teacher aide or the teacher in some of the centers. So it's kind of hard for them to be as effective if they want as they want for large groups. But I'm really big on like having like that individualized attention, especially when, like, I think it was Laura that mentioned this is the early childhood, you know what I mean? So essentially this is where you're really preparing them, you know, with those school readiness skills and introducing them to how the learning environment is supposed to be moving on as they get older in the system. So, and as a mother of a son with, you know, a disability, is just ensuring, and I think someone mentioned this earlier, that they're included in those different learning environments. So they're able to not only see peers that may have some developmental delays or, you know, various disabilities, but also they're able to see other students as well. And so they're all learning amongst each other, and they don't feel like they're being isolated in any type of way. But also, I think ensuring that there's good leadership with principals or directors leading those specific organizations. The environment that, you know, both the learner and the kids and the educators are in is very important. I think it should breed like kindness and just provide quality, just not with the resources, but just in the environment that they have to work in every day.
Yeah, you make me think about the importance of building relationships, right? And spending that individual time helps you to understand the personal needs of the child and then also provide that customized environment for the learner. So thank you for sharing that perspective. Anne Marie, why don't you share your perspective?
I would definitely have to agree with Amy and Monique when it comes to patience. That's a big one right there. Having a child with special needs, that's what I need on a day-to-day basis. So that's what I would hope his teacher or, you know, childcare provider would have as well. Just the willingness to adapt and learn as well. Like Monique said, you know, there's not one size fits all for classrooms or lesson plans. So being able to be flexible and to try to be adaptive and to, you know, be willing to, okay, you know, we're going to have class outside today instead of, you know, if it's like a frustrating lesson or something like that. The biggest thing for me, though, as a parent would be communication skills, whether it's the communication between themselves and the student or just the communication between, you know, the teacher and the parent. I have had a number of different therapists and teachers for my oldest over the years, and that has really come into play. If there is a good sense of communication, if I feel like I can go to the teacher with my concerns, or the OT or the speech therapist, or the ABA, and, you know, try to have open communication across the board. I've always given everyone's, you know, with permission, of course, and signing up forms and things. But I've always tried to have an open communication system between the teachers and the therapist, because, you know, as much as it's important to know what my child is like at home, they're the ones that went to school to learn and get the degree, and they know the different methods and what would work best, and what works best at school, you know, can be implemented during therapy, and then I can be taught how to implement it at home. And so communication for me, I would say that and patience are definitely my top two.
Anne Marie, can you share specifically, like, is there a communication system that you all have created? Like, what are some good examples of that? Because that's that wraparound support, right? So everybody's got to be on the same page. So
it's not as set up here as I would like it to be just yet. It is something that was better utilized when we lived in San Diego. I had open communication between all of the therapists, because there were 2 different offices that we would go to for his therapy. And then he had a childcare provider. And they were all kind of on the same email chain. And like, you know, this is what happened today. So like like communication sheets and things like that. And I know that's not possible for every student and every system, but I feel that if there are particular issues that need to be addressed, I do hope that there would be a way to convey those across the board.
Great, thank you. Thank you for that specific example. Brittany, Evelyn, I see your hand is raised. You had something to add to what Anne-Marie said?
I in defense of the early childhood educators, they need support from their admin. They need people who would recognize that you have to be creative in how you collect data and how you present that data. Everybody is so bogged down with the IEP reads this way. I need you to show me that he's met his goals this way. But if he can take off his shirt in the middle of a class, then he has the dexterity. He has so let the support be there from admin and from the higher ups to be able to allow teachers the flexibility to collect said data in however way it presents itself.
Okay. Anne-Marie, you have a follow-up to Evelyn?
I absolutely agree. I think it's so important for, the admin role to be as flexible as the teacher role, because, the goals are important. They are, but every kid is different. Every student is different, and they're going to reach different milestones at different times, but also in different ways. It's not always going to be the same, like how many ways are there to fold towels? I'm just saying, just as an example there. But I feel like everyone has to have some sort of level of flexibility.
There are
Thank
definitely
you.
multiple ways to fold towels, except in my household, my wife said there's only one way I need to follow to fold towels. So
Elsa, can you share with us the characteristics? What can you share? We have an interpreter help.
Sí, ¿qué nos puede decir? Tenemos la ayuda del intérprete. Pues yo pienso que para mí las maestras del centro donde van, siempre, yo no hablo inglés, solo hablo puro español, pero ellas, yo trato de comunicarme con ellas y ellas conmigo. Y yo creo que es muy importante la comunicación que uno tenga, como platicarles los avances que uno mira en los niños, ¿verdad? Y yo pienso que también eso las motiva a ellas. Para mí, en mi caso, me han tocado maestras muy buenas que han ayudado a mi hijo a vencer sus miedos y de verdad, no sé cómo pues ayudarlas, ¿no? Tal vez ellas tienen demasiados hijos y no se dan abasto, ¿verdad? Pero aún así ellas son muy buenas maestras. Nos comunicamos por medio de la persona que habla español, que ayuda a nosotros. Y pues, ¿qué puedo decir de ellas, verdad? Que yo pienso que mientras los padres estén en comunicación con los maestros, principalmente con las maestras, pues eso es fundamental.
Well, I think that the Teacher Center always, I don't speak English, I only speak Spanish, and they try to communicate with me, and I try to communicate with them. And I think that communication is really important, and it's important also to talk about the progress that we see in the children. And I believe that motivates the teachers, and I have I always had good teachers, and they help me with their fears to overcome them. And I don't know how to help them because I know that they have a lot of children, but they are very good teachers. We communicate through a platform to speak Spanish, and what we talk about, I think that as long as we have a good communication, parents with teachers and teachers with parents, I think that that's the most fundamental thing.
Thank you. And it's nice to hear that there's a specific platform that helps to remove that barrier from communication. So thank you. This is a nice segue to our next question. Oh, I see Laura had dropped something in the chat. The importance of inclusion, and it can be challenging to find a private or center-based childcare for inclusive kids with developmental delays. So that's a good perspective to share. Thank you. So in terms of family support, which is really, really important, the blueprint provides additional funding for family support programs, including Maryland infant and toddler programs for young children with disabilities and family support programs like the Judy Centers and Patty Centers. Describe your connection to these programs. How have they supported you and your child, and how would you make them even better? We're going to start with Bridget.
Okay. Well, I am a Judy Center teacher. I've been a Judy Center teacher for, I want to say, going on 5 years. I think it's an excellent program to have within the school. Now, I have had an opportunity to work at a school that did not have a Judy Center, so I see how beneficial they are. I think the only thing that I would like to see is those same programs being offered in schools that aren't Judy Center schools, so that, every child has the opportunity to have those programs to, enrich their education. In regards to infants and toddlers, my daughter was born 8 weeks early. So that's how I was introduced to infants and toddlers, straight at the hospital. And because she's a pandemic baby, and so right at the beginning of the pandemic, everything kind of shut down. So we just started her services with infants and toddlers, and it has been excellent. I have seen so much growth in such a short period of time. I'm just eager just to see how much more independent she becomes. She has a speech delay, so not being around a lot of a lot of children her age. She also participates in the programs, the playtime programs that Judy Center provides, so that she has that opportunity to have access to her peers her age. What I will say, I think it was Anna Marie, she was saying something about communication, just making it readily available, because I don't think that everyone has access or knows of those programs specifically tailored for infants and toddlers. I don't think that had I not been a childhood educator, or the hospital not provided me with that information, that I probably wouldn't have known of the programs that were available for my daughter.
And Bridget, those playtime activities are really fun. Can you describe the playtime? Because it really is good, especially as an inclusive practice as well. Just so the audience understands what happens.
Okay, so I'm not able to participate in in her playtime activities. Her grandmother participates because they're during the day and I'm teaching, but I hear all about them. They have today was with my gym, so she's actually able to tumble and throw balls and play, just regular everyday play that children do. And she has music time where she's learning how to that play-based that Laura was talking about. It's very, very rich. It's exciting. It's fun. They blow bubbles. They read stories. They have manipulatives that go along where they're participating. So it's so interactive. And she enjoys it. It's to the point now, her grandmother says, when she pulls up to the school, she knows exactly where she is. She gets out and she walks in. And she is just as excited, like, oh, I know I'm going to school, although it's not school, but she's ready. So that's what I want to see with her. And that interaction, the relationship, that she's built with children her age has transcended over to when I'm home and we walk to the playground, and she's able to try to communicate and play with other peers her age. So I'm very pleased with, whatever.
Thank you. And thank you for indulging us, because it's really important that we help our families visualize that as we try to increase their participation at the Judy Center. So I appreciate you sharing a real experience. Laura, can you share with us information about family support?
Sure, I can. So I was also involved with infants and toddlers right from the get-go after my first, and it was really great. I felt like they really listened to me, and they were so like absorbed in early childhood needs, and they were just great. And I know that there are some family programs here. I definitely think that that's something that could definitely be expanded, especially a lot of the programs seem to be kind of during the workday, which is hard for working parents or single moms who can't necessarily get their kids there. I'm also a military spouse, so we don't have family around. So, feeling like I was missing out on those things wasn't great. But yeah, I think that we really quickly were able to have people come in and provide evaluations and provide the care that we needed. And it was really incredible. I do think that more outreach in the community to learn about the services would be great. Here, parents are able to self-refer to infants and toddlers for any concerns, even if they go to pediatricians and verbalize something that's not necessarily agreed with, or the pediatrician doesn't want to proceed with evaluation. And I think a lot of people don't know that. So more education with the community would definitely be good.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I've heard that as well. When I was a principal, I used to hear that often when I would ask parents, like, what? I never knew about infants and toddlers at all. So I appreciate you sharing that perspective, because it actually is true. Thank you. Monique, what's your experience?
So my son has been involved in infants and toddlers, and so I got connected with them via the pediatrician because I brought up the fact that he had some delays in some areas. His was mainly speech. And so she's like, oh, well, you can connect with, infants and toddlers, and, they can do an assessment and things like that. So just first getting connected with them, and then having just a team of people that you work with that can connect you with different resources was just awesome. And like they said, they're very good listeners, and the fact that they cater to just the family. A lot of resources are just looking just at the child or the kid, which is important, but sometimes the dynamic and the things that surround individual family is important. And so the fact that they, ask me as a parent, I happen to be a single mom, and I work full time. So they had, like she said, there's a lot of resources that are available, and I kind of hop on in between meetings and kind of shift my obligations with work. But essentially, there's a lot that's out there, and sometimes it's overwhelming. You have to kind of do a deep dive to get the details with things. But the fact that they can kind of connect you initially with some of those resources is really important, in that they just have an overall involvement in the entire family and how whatever's going on with your child as far as development and learning, and how it's kind of incorporated in the family, not just in like a school setting, but also how are they learning just daily life skills, things like that. So having like that special educator and the other clinicians with infants and toddlers has been life-changing. But I don't know if this is considered one of the early childhood centers, because it's not like a Judy Center, but my son also goes to an ABA center, in which that's where he really picked up most of a lot of his skills. I know that like the pre-K or early centers can't be as individualized as that setting because it's more therapeutic, but essentially the fact that they assess, where that child is and what skills that they need to work on, essentially that idea is kind of like how I want it to kind of overflow into like the pre-K setting. It's like, okay, we know that we have a different array of kids here. If we keep the class sizes a certain way, a teacher can be able to manage the different learning styles of the kids that are involved. And then that way, there's not a kid that's falling behind or to the wayside, or those readiness skills that they need to move to, the first grade or kindergarten or what have you. They're actually picking up on it early on. So, those are just some of my kind of thoughts about everything. It's just making sure that the resources essentially that are needed for both the kids and family are available.
And you mentioned a key player in this. You mentioned pediatricians, because as you mentioned, they can help make references and support families. And then having those liaisons to help navigate those resources is extremely helpful, which you alluded to. So thank you for highlighting that. Anne-Marie, I see you have your hand raised with the follow-up.
Yes, so Monique pointed out that her child goes to an ABA center, and I love those. I miss having one nearby. We attended one when we lived in San Diego, and it really, my child thrived. So much progress was made. It was a wonderful thing. It was a group setting, but they also each had their own ABA therapist. So they would do group activities and there would be like a teacher, but then they also had their support system with them. So I do miss that. I wish there were ones that were a lot closer to me. Initially, that's what I wanted when we moved out here, but the nearest one is unfortunately like over an hour away. And I also have a 9-month-old. So not really feasible for the day-to-day. So ABA is great. I cannot speak highly enough of the pediatrician that we saw when my son was an infant, and early intervention. Early intervention is key. I feel like that is like the very tip of the iceberg right there, because if you get the early intervention and you see the progress, it pushes you to advocate for them and to strive for, what's next? What can we do? What can they learn now? It helps you feel like, maybe there is a wall, but we can get through it. You're not by yourself. You're not alone. There are people out there, but early intervention is key. My son was an early speaker. He started speaking at 4 months. By 15 months, he had lost all of his words. And then by 18 months is when we got our first diagnosis of autism. And he just turned 5 this month. So he's come a long way, but early intervention was definitely key. He's very high functioning, but I'm thankful to all of the pediatricians and therapists that helped along the way.
That was a great story, and thank you for sharing your personal experience. Monique, you had a follow-up, Anne-Marie?
Just wanted to be quick. I just wanted to mention that, because you start out with like, ABA center, I've opted to keep him in the ABA an additional year. So I'm not entering him into pre-K in the fall. And that's because of how he's thriving in that center, because it's so specialized and individualized to him. And I know that as good as the pre-K center may be in this area, it's not going to provide that particular level of education and service to him. And that's why I'm opting to keep him in an additional year. And so those are the things that I had to think about as a parent, for my child. Do I want to, go ahead and immerse him and enroll him into pre-K, or do I want to keep him at a center that I know is going to be honing in on all these different skills that essentially, I'm like, school's not going anywhere. It will be there. Essentially, that's how I look at it. Kindergarten, first grade, by the time he's that age, it will still be there. But those skills that they're instilling in him and working with him on his level will be so important by the time he's sitting in that classroom with these different educators and mixed with these other students.
And you're making the best decision for your child. And so that is commendable, commendable. Brittany, I think your mic is working now. You want to give it a try? Maybe you can share your perspective.
Hello.
Yay, we can hear you. Go ahead, Brittany.
Yeah. Hold on. I was gonna say I gotta read the question.
Okay. We're talking about family support.
Oh, okay. I would say about like having different resources or therapy and like family or friends that support the children and having any type of special needs or anything. I prefer or I recommend like different, like if they had like if the Judy Center or anywhere, any public school, any private school have like their own little session for like special needs kids and have give them support and advice to different stuff and like helping them out. That's my prescription. I can't even get the word out, but that's my idea of having support or something towards the Judy Center.
Great, thank you. And it ties into, I see Laura dropped something in the chat too. Resources and support groups for mothers would be so helpful as well, given the positive correlation between postpartum depression and infants with developmental delays. So that's a great idea. Thank you. Okay, we are wrapping up.
I'm gonna cut you off. Can I?
No, go ahead. Go. Your mic's working. Go for it.
I actually attended different groups. It was with Be More for Healthy Babies. I don't know if anybody ever heard of them, but I've been with them for several years, and they helped me out. And also, it's another program I actually attended. It was called Drew Mom Dharma, where they had like parent support group. Even if in like Be More Healthy Babies, like if you're going through something or you never know what a person is actually going through, so they'd be like, you can meditate at home. Somebody might be driving you crazy, or you might have a bad day. You can meditate and like put some calm music on. But these are the like programs I actually attended, like when I had my kids and stuff like that. And I just like if anybody is interested in ever, or they know anyone that's in need of being in the program and they just had a baby, or they new first time moms, or you could be anything. You could just had a baby this year. Mm-hmm. And if you want the information, I can write it down in the chat.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Brittany. Yeah, mention those two programs again one more time.
Okay, yes, the two programs I actually attended was Be More for Healthy Babies. I can actually write it down in the chat. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that will be great. This is how we help each other, by sharing information. So yes, we appreciate you sharing that. Okay, last question. This is Mr. Chaudhry's favorite question. If you had $1 million to spend on childcare and early childhood education, how would you use it? Ooh, that's good. Evelyn, we're going to start with you.
Just $1 million? Can I get a little bit more?
You just have $1 million. What would be the biggest? The whole point of it is you have $1 million. So what would be the thing that would give the biggest return on investment?
There would never be a chair in a pre-K early childhood desk chair, even for eating. We're going to be outside. Let's play, learn through play. I think there's a lot of pressure on early childhood to prepare kids for K through 12. And parents are being pressured because the expectation is by the time your child enters K, they need to be able to know certain letters and count up to a certain number. And when parents don't get that from early childhood, then they tend to like pull their kids out from that place and put them somewhere else. Personally, I think, especially with COVID, I've seen these kids coming in with, they can memory count from 1 to 100, but they have no social emotional skills at all. They can't take turns. They don't know how to they don't have. I think for me, if I had $1 million, I would make early childhood be as play centered and as unschooled as it possibly could be, because I think there's so much learning that happens that way that would better prepare them for K through 12 versus sitting down and doing worksheets and coloring your lines when you're 3 years old.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. John, we haven't heard from you in a while.
Evelyn, I really like what you said. I mean, I know I piggybacked off you last time, but my wife and I were just talking about learning through play. Being in the school setting, my wife and I both are teachers. We have tremendously smart children, but they don't know how to act. They don't know how to play with each other. They don't know how to be around each other. And it's causing so many issues in the classroom, so many issues in the school. Um, uh, I don't want to go on my own experiences, but we've seen so many behavior issues. And I think a lot of it comes from the fact that kids don't know how to play with each other. Kids don't know how to interact with each other. And I think putting a curriculum or a program in place where childcare centers and family childcare centers can teach these kids how to just associate with one another. And I think what I was talking about earlier with this testing and data collection in schools is that that's getting lost. We're so worried about our test scores. We're so worried about our scores. And that even trickles down to childcare and family childcare centers because they're trying to get the kids learning too, but we're not focusing on how are you going to be a good citizen? How are you going to be a good person? What difference is you going to make in the world? And I think that's the biggest issue. And I that's really what our one big thing we wanted to spend this $1 million on. That's what it would be.
Thank you. And John, you spoke to the social emotional aspect of school, right? And how to
Yes.
help students engage and learn that, which is critically important as well. So thank you for elevating that. Monique, how would you spend your money?
I think we've talked about it a few times on the call. Essentially, I think it starts with like the educators, like compensation and benefits, because they're the ones who are working directly with our little ones. So essentially, if they feel like they're being compensated for like their dedication to our kids and feeling, I think they'll feel more enthusiastic about being immersed in the learning. And, when you're talking about play, they're more excited. They're like, okay, I feel like I'm being valued based on, what I'm doing for a living. Essentially, these are our little ones. And so just making sure, it's so many different elements with that too. It's like, I don't know if it's certain hiring committees to focus on, the educators that have specific qualities and, that have the guiding points, to hire these educators, so that, if there's someone who has the tenacity to want to work with the kids and they're feeling like they're compensating, even if they lack some type of training, whether it's sensitivity training or whatever they feel as though is needed for that classroom of kids, that the school or that organization provides it for them, so that all of it working together provides an environment for the kids that they all thrive. Like, it's not, the teacher's not bogged down because they're overworked or they're underpaid or they feel, they have their own personal stresses that spill over into the classroom, or they're feeling like, oh, I would love to do these certain things with my kids, like you said, oh, I could do this play thing, but my administrator is saying they have to do this and I have to report out on that. So it's all connected. So if you start with the principal or the administrators and you kind of trickle everything down and make it more synergistic. It's like, okay, if we make sure we're putting the money in the right places and making sure that people that are really immersed in the learning are feeling valued and compensated, it's like, okay, I feel like I can do this extra mile for these kids because I know, ultimately where they'll be if I put this extra, effort in it. And just, I have to always speak from a parent that has a child with special needs, essentially, because I sometimes worry. He's extra tall for his age as well, and so making sure, and he's strong. Essentially, I think those are some aspects or traits with ASD, essentially, but making sure that he's, as he gets older or he's in that classroom, he still has that same sensitivity from the educators that his peers do. Just because he's taller or bigger or stronger, still viewed as like he's still a kid, like he still needs that same soft care that the other kids do. So it's just so many aspects that I just kind of think about. But training and putting the right people in place, and that's also in leadership. You can have some great educators in an environment, whether it's daycare, preschool, or what have you, but then the head will make the whole entire organization not worth staying there. So, if you've seen it where there's a great leadership, because there's bosses and then there's leaders. So essentially, a leader is someone who takes care of the people under their charge. A boss just wants to be in charge. So it's like looking at those different things and working from the top down. It makes a big difference.
Thank you. Thank you. Amy, what about you? How would you spend your money?
Sure. So my number one again was kind of the pay and the benefits. But I know that obviously Monique just kind of touched on that. So I'm just going to jump to my number two. That I feel that kind of going back to the play-based and what we're seeing in the public schools when they're a little bit older, the behaviors that come from the lack of socialization, that I feel like it really goes down all the way to infancy. And I feel like what we're finding, at least here in our county, is that we really need an increase in classrooms for the underprivileged ages. So for example, like the infant through 2 is really a money loss, is kind of how the centers see it, because it's such a small ratio and they have to charge so much. That some ideas would be to create some type of like stipend or grant situation where it allows for more available care for that age group. And I feel like, that's kind of what we've been saying too, is obviously the teachers and the leaders are super important, but we're seeing that if kiddos are getting, let's say just pre-K, they're at home and then they go to pre-K, sometimes that 1 year of socialization isn't enough help to kind of support them along the way. Whereas if they're in a center from infancy and on, that's helpful. But I mean, I know at least here in Washington County, it is over double the amount from in-home daycare to a center. And a lot of the centers don't take infant to 2 because they just start at either 2 or 3 because of the profitable loss. So I think that there's something to look into for some support for centers at that age group.
Thank you, Amy, for highlighting that age group, because sometimes it gets lost in the conversation, and that is a need that providers have elevated as well. So thank you. Thank you. I know Elsa wanted to comment as well. Elsa, how would you spend your money?
Bueno, yo pienso que también estoy de acuerdo con las demás mamás, que son mamás, porque somos mamás, ¿verdad? Y todos queremos lo mejor para nuestros hijos. Y pues yo creo que la importancia de las maestras es fundamental. Solo que, pues a veces, como ustedes dicen, las otras mamás tal vez no tienen suficiente pues no les alcanza, ¿verdad? Su pago, entonces tienen que irse, pero yo también estoy de acuerdo con todas ellas, creo que ya lo dijeron todo. Es importante el preocuparse por ellas, ¿no? Por su pago, para que pues también ellas, si son unas buenas maestras, pues van a educar a los niños al futuro, ¿verdad? Solo quiero comentar, creo que esto era en la pregunta anterior, solamente rapidito. Yo estoy en el programa mi hijo está en Head Start, mi hija está en el Early Head Start. Entonces, para mí es bien importante que él vaya a la escuela, ¿verdad? Me queda un centro un poquito más cerca, pero yo prefiero llevarlo más lejos, manejo casi 20 minutos, me queda 20 minutos, media hora el centro, pero voy allá por la capacidad que siento que tienen las maestras para él. Entonces, como que todo nos lleva a lo mismo, que las educadoras son lo más importante. Mi visitadora es una gran persona, siempre están ahí ayudándonos, a mi familia, a mis hijos, y yo pienso que pues la importancia de las maestras es fundamental. Y yo, si tuviera ese dinero, lo gastaría en ellas, ¿verdad? Su sueldo de ellas, para que sigan siendo a las personas que pues que están enseñando a nuestros hijos, pues a veces cosas que nosotros no somos capaces, sí las sabemos, pero ellas tienen como diariamente están pues con ellos, ¿no? Porque ellas pasan más tiempo que nosotros como papás. Eso es todo.
So I think, and I believe that I echo everything that other moms have said and other parents have said so far. I think educators, teachers are key. They are extremely important, as everybody else said. Sometimes teachers leave because they do not have enough money, and we need to do whatever is necessary to retain them. So I believe teachers and educators are very important. And I have two children, and one of my children is in one of the programs, and he goes to school, and I actually have a center nearby that's closer, 20 or 30 minutes away from our house, but I'd rather make a larger distance so that he can have access to better teachers and the ones that I know that look after him and cater to everything that he needs. So that's why I believe that educators are so important. They are always there helping families, helping children. So they are key. And if I had this money, I would simply spend it on their salary because they sometimes spend more time than we do as parents with our children.
Thank you. We appreciate this theme of recognizing and appreciating our early childhood providers through looking at compensation. So thank you. And that comment, Elsa's comment, ties into something I want to mention that Amy put in the chat, but also from our YouTube. So Amy mentioned that in rural areas in rural areas allowing community-based centers to fill the majority of the pre-K spots. Centers can take all the low-income students below 300% of the federal poverty line, but these families don't have transportation to get to the center. The public schools are allowed to accept pre-K of all income levels, and the public schools have resources to transport those students. Working with the public schools to help those families with transportation to the rural community-based centers would be very helpful. Thank you, Amy. And also I wanted to just call out two of our YouTube friends that dropped something in the chat. Flora Gee says, it's very true about having a problem when you're living in a county but attending childcare in another county. Our state should provide reciprocity between jurisdictions so all children can succeed. And then Ruth Reyes says, one thing MSDE should work on is promoting the importance of early intervention, which we've talked about this evening. Our families have a misconception about this, and many of our families don't know where to find the resources. So thank you for elevating that. Yes, and for being an ambassador for that work as well. And our final YouTube chat from Chantel Taylor says she would like to see more grants and funding for startup in-home family daycares. Thank you. And that actually came up at our board meeting this week as well, as another suggestion. So thank you very much. I think I did pretty good on time. But before I wrap us up, Mr. Chaudhary, did you have any closing comments you wanted to share?
I don't want to be too long, but this is recorded. We are definitely taking copious notes. Heard a lot today on the importance of play-based learning, and just being intentional about that. It's intentional play, and with a purpose. And I think it's very important that the State Department of Education uses its status to ensure that is elevated and not lost in the conversation. So I hear you loud and clear. As someone who originally from California, I just moved here from Texas, where I spent a good chunk of my career and launched several Montessori schools. So the play-based concept is definitely and made them work with the tension of testing as well. And so it's very possible. So I hear you loud and clear. And so much is embedded in that. And just, the other piece is just being able to navigate the best fit option for your child and what that looks like and matters. Like I said, as a new parent, I don't know where I will land on that. But that is something I'm sure my wife will probably decide for me, but we will land on our best fit option ultimately. And so I thank you guys so much for your time, for speaking your truth. We are really listening, and this is what I call the blueprint generation, and we have a chance to really lots of dollars being invested in our state to get it right. So let's take this opportunity to really reimagine things. So I really appreciate your time. That's all, Deanne.
Thank you. And thank you. This was a fun and engaging panel. So I appreciated the time that I could take to facilitate. I enjoyed speaking and hearing from all of you. So to our participants and those of you viewing on YouTube Live, the State Board and the Maryland State Department of Education, we thank you. We thank you for joining us tonight for this roundtable discussion with family members of our earliest learners. It was just great to hear your voice and your experiences and for you to speak your truth. Your feedback will guide the development of our strategic plan. And we need to hear from as many of you as possible. Our superintendent always talks about casting the net, right? Making sure we're hearing from multiple voices. So again, we've launched our strategic planning survey that we encourage every Marylander to complete at marylandpublicsschools.org/survey. Please fill this out. Every comment and piece of feedback is read. And so we really want all of our community members and partners to fill out the survey. Thank you all for this evening, and we are going to close out. Have a great rest of your night.